How much do you actually know about determinism?
You know, I I don't know how much I know actually. That's a very good question. I think got maybe the basics, but I don't feel like I could even explain it very well. Um, so maybe I
Oh,
don't know it as well as I think I do.
it's one of those complicated kind of topics. The basic gist of it is that everything that exists is necessarily created by the moment before it. And our minds are the products of our brains, and our brains are entirely physical processes. The mental properties can't interact with the physical properties of the brain. It's a one way sort of system. And just like any other system in the universe, it's bound by physics. And therefore, physics determines our thoughts and our emotions and things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I completely agree, with the exception possibly of when you said that the mental aspects can't uh, interfere, I think was the word you used, with the
Interact.
interact with the physical aspects. I would say that mental aspects are actually just physical.
How do you mean?
Like, let's say a thought. A thought isn't necessarily physical, I guess, because an idea is just kind of abstract. However, that thought is really just electrical impulses in your brain, and because of that, it's physical. Like, it's physical, but also not, I guess.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. That's basically the idea of determinism. The mental properties, say, the thought that you have in your brain, that's the English word thought, that itself isn't a physical object. Um, in other words, we couldn't hold it up for investigation. What we could hold up for investigation are the processes that create the thought. Um, so the mental state is synonymous with the physical state, but it's not the physical state itself. It's do you know what the word phenomenological is?
I can't say that I could put a definition to it.
Okay, phenomenological things are basically things we experience.
Ah,
they're things that happen and that are experienced. And the idea is, you know what materialism is?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, there's another idea that's very similar to materialism, which is called physicalism. And that's the idea that everything can be expressed in terms of physics. Everything can be reduced to physics. Now, a mental property is something that we experience, but it can be reduced down to a physical state. So while we can't actually have access to the mental state, we can have access to the physical state that creates it. But it's a one way system. So if you have a thought, that thought is created by the physical system, but there's no sort of feedback loop that comes from mental causation.
Yeah, I'm following so far.
Okay.
I think
And that's, well,
that's
that's
kind
basically what determinism is everything goes one way.
right, right. So you have like a period, as an example, like you have a period of time in which an event occurs. Then every subsequential event is determined by the event that happened previous to that event.
Yeah, including our desires and our wants and the things that we will. We That's why the sort of statement illusion free will is an illusion. The way we experience things feels like a choice, but it's not really. It's biological processing.
Right, because the what happened previously to our minds or bodies was determined our emotions, feelings, thoughts, etc. And because of that, we couldn't have thought any other way because it was determined by those previous events. Therefore, we don't actually have free will, although it feels like we do.
Yeah, exactly. And because free will would entail some process where our mental states and our mental events could supervene onto our physical states, our actual brain states. And without, in determinism, of course, and physicalism, there is no way for that to go the other way, which is why free will is impossible and why people choose determinism.
Right. Because the physicality determines the mental state. The mental state cannot determine the physicality. Is
Exactly.
that accurate? Okay.
And that's basically all determinism is, in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think that was
the
really
idea.
elegantly explained.
Oh, thank you. I have some practice doing this. I've got a master's degree in philosophy.
Ah, gotcha.
So, yeah, I like these kind of discussions as well. One of the arguments is for determinism, if you want to put it sort of in a succinct way, is physical effects can only cause physical effects. And the only thing that can cause an effect is a physical event. So therefore, determinism must be true.
Yes. And we have no evidence of a non-physical event ever affecting a physical event. Therefore, we have no reason to believe it's not true.
Something like
yeah,
that.
If you understand my weird double negative there, I think.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, it is something like that.
You're right. And the only argument for determinism not being true is that we feel like we have free will, but I think your own feelings should probably be discounted because we can't really determine truth by our feelings.
I'm not necessarily in agreement with that.
Okay.
If you feel sad, then it's true that you're sad.
No doubt.
If you feel, there are certain ways where feelings can get us to the truth, like we are aware of our own internal states, and sometimes like we might get a bad feeling about somebody and say you're a bit drunk and you feel that trouble is coming. More often than not, it does, especially if you've had that experience several times and you learn to read the body language.
Okay.
So intuitions can sometimes get us to truth. It really depends on the kind of truth that you're speaking about.
Sure. Yeah, I suppose in certain circumstances, like the example of me feeling sad, there would be no doubt that that feeling would, be true. There'd be no reason to think otherwise. However,
No.
I don't know that it's. I guess the reliability of coming to a conclusion based off a feeling, it can lead you to a conclusion that is correct, but can it always lead you to a conclusion 100% of the time that is correct? I would say no.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that. It's not necessarily a reliable means to ascertain certain types of truths, but that doesn't mean that a statement like feelings can't get us to a truth is a true statement.
Fair enough.
Do you see the distinction?
Yes.
Sorry, being a philosopher, you kind of get a stickler for distinctions. It's one of my main bugbears that I have with a lot of atheists who say feelings can't determine truth. Well, it's not entirely correct. It's not a necessarily reliable means for investigating the world, but it's too broad of a statement to say that it can't lead you to truth.
Yeah, I guess I've never thought about it in that particular way. Because I've always really thought that statement to be true, but based off what you've said, I suppose I can agree that that statement might not always be true.
Yeah. Um, like, I mean, there's cases like people who say, I've had a religious experience, therefore I think it's true that God exists. I don't think feelings in that case can necessarily lead us to a truth that God exists. It can lead us to a truth that somebody's had this sort of experience, but that's about as far as it gets.
Sure, it's kind of confined to that particular individual. Is that kind of
Yeah.
yeah?
And even if there's sort of shared experiences between the religious experience, that could come from things that they've learned from their environment. So it creates that kind of experience for them. And the same religious experience in various different cultures or for the truth that there is a God or even some kind of divine, what's it called, sensus divinitas, that we can have a sense of the divine and our feelings come from the divine, and this sensus divinitas tells us that it's true. I don't think feelings can get us to a truth in that way.
Right. It really depends on what we're investigating.
Yeah, and that would be true for any method of investigation. Like, you wouldn't go with a strictly scientific method for investigating history or historical events, because that kind of rigorous investigation won't really get you very far in historical investigation.
Sure, because in a historical investigation, you'd probably primarily be investigating sources and written material, perhaps not so much conducting
Physical effect.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, it's less biology and physics and more sort of Sherlock Holmes, so to
Right.
speak.
Sure.
Yeah, the determinism thing didn't last very long. It's quite a simple concept once you get your mind around it.
Yeah, it really is. It's something that I have great difficulty explaining, but it's rather simple and straightforward. It's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah. Have you heard of a site called the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy?
I have not.
Okay. That site and the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy are two really good resources if you ever want to go to learn about something like determinism.
Okay, awesome. I will have to check that out.
And of course, if you ever want chat, like I'm doing another degree at the moment, so I'm not usually available during the day. I'm in the UK, but in the evenings, if you ever wanted to chat about something, just send me a message.
Okay,
Or
sure.
if you ever want to come on our stream and have a discussion.
Yeah, yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go make some dinner then, and I'll leave you to it. It was great chatting to you and great meeting you.
You too. Thank you. Enjoy your dinner.
Yeah, have a great evening.
Yeah,
Bye now.
bye.